Hey guys, welcome to Train Forever. I'm Andrew Barr, and today we're going to be talking about training for hypertrophy or muscle size versus training for strength, with a particular focus on how to approach this as a beginner. Now this is a huge topic, way more than I could cover in one video, so today we'll be focusing on three pieces of the puzzle. We're going to talk about the relative treatment of compound versus accessory exercises for each training outcome, as well as the optimal rep ranges to use. And we'll also look at muscle failure and whether it should be avoided or included in your training. For any new lifter, rather than being laser focused on size or strength, your training journey should start with the fundamentals. You're not going to be able to add much size or strength if you can't squat, deadlift, lunge, or press without basic proficiency. Your journey should begin by learning movement skills, learning how to move under load, getting comfortable with following a training program, and training consistently. Obsessing over minutia like the best rep zone is a mistake early in your training journey. But let's fast forward a little bit and say that you have those first few months of training under your belt and you're interested in becoming specialized in your focus. This makes sense. Let's look at these three training variables and see how they can be manipulated to optimally achieve the objective of either size or strength. Point number one, compound versus accessory exercises. Exercises can be categorized as compound or accessory movements. This can also be described as multi-joint or single joint exercises. Any half-decent program is going to emphasize compound lifts. The fact that the opposite is called accessory gives us a clue there. But both exercises have their place in all types of training programs. It's the relative emphasis and approach to each that changes depending on training goal. If your goal is to become stronger, the case for compound exercises is obvious. Squatting, deadlifting, and pressing, these are the movements in which the human body can lift the most weight. If your goal is to become stronger, that means you want to lift more weight, produce more force, however you want to describe it. These are the movements in which the human body can do that, so you want to focus your training on those movements to help you achieve your goal. Simple. Accessory exercises are still essential for success in a long-term strength-focused program, in part because they help your body withstand the demands imposed by heavy barbell work. In spite of what some coaches might say, squatting, deadlifting, and pressing simply doesn't give your body everything it needs from training. How could it? Let's consider the bench press and the effect that it has on the shoulders. Bench pressing is the upper body exercise in which a human body can produce the most force. So it makes perfect sense that it would be a focal point of a strength-focused program. If you're bench pressing correctly, you're going to be building strength in your pecs and your lats. This is great, but both of these muscles are powerful internal rotators of the shoulder. If this isn't counterbalanced in some way, shoulders can drift into an internal rotation bias, which is a postural issue that can cause pain and force you to take time off training. Doing exercises that involve external rotation of the shoulder, a great example is the banded face pull, help your shoulders withstand the demands imposed by your heavy bench pressing. So while not specifically relevant for the expression of maximal force, doing accessory movements can keep your joints healthy to allow you to train harder for longer. If you're finding this content useful and informative, give me a like and make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll be putting out a new video each week to help you get the most out of your training. I really appreciate your support. The case for including accessory exercises in a hypertrophy or size-focused program is a little bit more obvious. In fact, in my experience, you sometimes have to work a little harder to convince recreational lifters of the benefits of doing compound exercises. Both compound and accessory exercises can make a muscle grow. The things that make a muscle grow are load or tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. You can create any one or combination of these three with either a compound or accessory lift, depending on how you manipulate it to build it into your program. Even though any exercise can stimulate muscle growth, we have to zoom out and consider the big picture and the broader context of the training program for our exercise selections to be optimally effective. One of the main drivers of muscle growth is total weekly training volume, as measured by the number of working sets. Different muscles respond better to different volume ranges, but let's use the bicep as an example because who doesn't want bigger biceps? Now again, even for the biceps, there is a range, but we can say that the biceps respond well to about 20 working sets per week. You can train your biceps with chin-ups and rows, and of course you can train them with curls. Now, you can get your 20 working sets per week by just doing chin-ups and rows, but that would be very fatiguing. One of the limiting factors to training performance is central fatigue, or fatigue of the nervous system. Exercises that use more of your body take more out of you and are more centrally fatiguing, which means that you have less energy to put into other aspects of your training. With the example of the biceps, your best strategy is to get some of your training volume with chin-ups and rows, and the remainder of your volume with an accessory movement like curls. The flip side of this is that if you're doing 20 sets of curls each week, you're simply going to not have enough time to train the rest of your body. One of the benefits of a multi-joint exercise that trains multiple muscle groups is that that working set counts towards your volume threshold for each worked muscle group. The bottom line is that a mix of compound and accessory exercises will help lifters find the optimal balance between intensity of effort and time in the gym, allowing them to move forward towards their training goals while still leaving time and energy for other things. Leave me a comment and let me know if you agree or if you disagree or if you just have a question about training. I'll be happy to answer every one. Point number 2, optimal rep ranges. Focusing on size or strength is going to influence what rep ranges are optimal for your training goal, but not necessarily for all exercises. Strength training prioritizes lower rep zones, like 5 or less. This makes sense. Since strength is the ability to produce force, you're going to develop that quality by producing force, and that means lifting heavy. If you're lifting heavy, you have to compromise on the number of times that you lift the weight. This does not mean that you do all of your exercises in that 1 to 5 rep range. It is dangerous and counterproductive to try to do accessory movements like curls or lateral raises in that 5 or less rep range. Regardless of your training goal, there are principles of biomechanics and physiology that are inescapable. Muscles like the posterior deltoid or the muscles of the rotator cuff are small, and that means that they're designed to only really produce small amounts of force. Although they absolutely contract and participate when they're involved in a heavy movement like a deadlift, when we're asking them to be the prime mover in an exercise like a lateral raise, high rep, low weight training is the best way to stimulate those muscles. Not just because we want to avoid injury, but because it is the best way to make those muscles grow. This principle of different muscle groups responding better to different rep ranges is also interesting when we consider our movement selection. Different movements do better in different rep ranges as well. When we're using the example of our heavy compound exercises, they tend to work best in a 5 to 10 rep range when our goal is size, as compared to that 1 to 5 range when our goal is strength. The reason for this is that those factors that we discussed earlier that contribute to growth, like load and tension, stress and damage, those are best accumulated over a few more repetitions, like 5 to 10. But really, any rep range can drive muscle growth. I'm a big fan of how Mike Israetel from Renaissance Periodization breaks this down, where some exercises do best in a 5 to 10 rep range, some in a 10 to 20 rep range, and some in a 20 to 30 rep range, where larger movements that use more of the body do better in lower rep ranges, and vice versa. The takeaway here is that the approach to choosing the best rep range for accessory movements is actually quite similar for both size and strength focused programs, because there are certain realities of biomechanics and physiology that we can't ignore. It's the approach to compound exercises that differ significantly when our objective is either size or strength. Point number 3, muscle failure. Muscle failure is probably one of the most overrated training strategies out there. To get the most out of your training, you'll want to limit muscle failure when your goal is training for size, and you'll want to all but avoid it entirely when your goal is training for strength. On the surface, training to failure makes sense. It is, factually, the hardest that you can train, and no pain, no gain, right? And also, failure is a great way to get a really significant muscle pump, and it can also cause a lot of muscle soreness. All of these can give the appearance of very effective training, but none of them mean that going to muscle failure is actually the optimal way to train. When we're trying to make a muscle bigger, we know that one of the most important things is to accumulate a lot of weekly volume as measured by working sets. Research also tells us that training a muscle group twice per week gives better results than training a muscle group once per week. So we know that we need to accumulate a ton of volume, and we need to do it across at least 2 workouts. The issue with going to muscle failure is it's so intense that it can compromise your ability to complete working sets in that same workout or in your second workout for that same muscle group later in the week. You get that satisfying pump and soreness, but if it compromises your ability to accumulate volume, it's counterproductive. If your goal is strength, you want to avoid muscle failure as much as possible. Part of that has to do with the multifaceted nature of strength. A concept that I don't think gets enough attention is that size is a measure of what your body is, strength is a measure of what your body can do. And the pathway through which strength is expressed is multifaceted. Part of that equation is neuromuscular, and part of that neuromuscular element is motor learning. When you're trying to get stronger, that means you're trying to be successful in lifting heavier weights. That means completing your reps. If you fail or miss reps often as a deliberate training strategy, you are in effect teaching your body how to miss reps, which is obviously counterproductive to your goal of not missing reps. Now, if you miss a rep occasionally as part of your training, that's just going to happen as you continue to push yourself and try to move forward. So if it's a once in a while thing, it's not going to make a difference. But if you've designed your strength training program so that every last rep of the set you're missing the rep because you've reached your absolute max, you will find that that is counterproductive to you reaching your strength goal. It's also important to remember that strength training, even when perfectly designed, is hard, and it takes a lot of energy to recover from, even under optimal circumstances. So if we're adding in this additional challenge of going to muscle failure, you're asking the body to work that much harder to recover from your workouts, which will compromise your ability to do good work on a workout to workout and week to week basis. I hope you found this information useful, and if you did, please make sure you give me a like and make sure you subscribe so you never miss another training tip. If you check out the description, you'll see a link to my free guide to developing core strength, as well as a link to my 12-week strength training program specifically for beginners, and you can find information about my online coaching as well. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.